now we're at the fifth power, Cataclysm. And Cataclysm happens. It just does happen. As it happened to Job in the Bible. And this is from Job. Yet does not one in a heap of ruins stretch out his hand, or in his disaster therefore cry out for help? Have I not wept for the one whose life is hard? Was not my soul grieved for the needy? When I expected good, then evil came. When I waited for light, then darkness came. I am seething within and cannot relax. Days of affliction confront me. I go about mourning without comfort. I stand up in the assembly and cry out for help. I have become a brother to jackals and a companion of ostriches. My skin turns black on me, and my bones burn with fever. Therefore, my harp is turned to mourning, and my flute to the sound of those who weep. And that's what the whole story is about. And it goes from bad to worser still. The universe builds up and stabilizes, and then the universe breaks down and takes away. Tragedy occurs even in the best of times, and in the course of the movement of the world, cataclysm happens. Even when we're doing the best we can to live according to our highest values, cataclysm can come cascading. Cataclysm arrives, for example, in the form of natural disasters, illnesses, financial ruin, loss of loved ones, and crises of faith. Cataclysm arrives as culture clash, war, oppression, genocide. In a time of cataclysm, Job railed at God and finally came to deeper understanding. The would-be Buddha, Prince Siddhartha, walked out of the palace where he had been very well sheltered, only to discover the heartbreak of pain, suffering, old age, and death, and thus were sown the seeds of Buddhism. Siddhartha Gautama was born about 560 BC, 563 BC in Nepal, northern India. Basically, he had a life where he was completely provided for, and he was apparently extremely good looking, everything at his command, well built, nice body, according to the legend. Okay, and he was married. He had grown up, married a beautiful woman, Yashodhara. They had a son named Rahula, but something bothered him. Something was always bothering him. He felt a sense of discontent. He felt like something was wrong, but he couldn't name it. Just a feeling of discontent. So he felt like he needed to go beyond the palace walls and see what was out there. And he finally convinced people to take him out. So maybe they take him out on a, what's it called? Palanquin. What's it called?
Palanquin.
A palanquin. I just was picturing that. The Buddha going out on a palanquin. Like looking out. And basically, but according to the story, according to the legend, they arranged what he would see. Okay, so he only saw beautiful things. And they would take him out around. But then one day he saw somebody, he saw somebody who was really sick. And he'd never seen anybody really sick before. And he said, well, what is that? Oh, well, that man is sick. Sick? Well, he'd never seen sick before because he was always sheltered from it. So he said, I want to see sick. I want to see what this is. I want to understand this. I knew there was something going on. So he basically leaves the palace and he goes out and he begins to witness the suffering in the world. He goes behind the scenes of the show and he witnesses pain, suffering, old age, and death. So then what he finally comes to is that he needs a way to understand this because it's baffling to him. And now he knows this truth of pain, suffering, old age, and death. So he decides to go live in the forest with the ascetics, the ones who get rid of their clothes and their worldly possessions and live on 5 grains of rice a day and all of this with a lot of physical mortification, body mortification. So he's living there for some time in the forest, and basically one day he wakes up and realizes, you know what, this isn't accomplishing anything, doing all this suffering, but I don't know what the answer is. I know there's got to be some answer, but I don't think my answer is going to come through just joining in all this suffering. What good is that going to do? So he says, okay, I'm leaving here and I'm going to go do something else. Well, he winds up sitting down under a tree, and he finally says, I'm not going to move from under this tree until I've learned something. So he sits down under a tree, and this tree later becomes known as the Bo tree or the Bodhi tree. And Bodhi means enlightenment. So it's going to be the enlightenment tree. He vows not to move until he's enlightened, and he spends 49 days under this tree, according to Houston Smith. 49 days under the tree. Elsewhere, I've heard 40 days under the tree. I kind of like 40 days under the tree, even though I get the 7 times 7 thing. But I like the way 40 works with a lot of other things that are happening, spiritually speaking. But anyway, so he spends these days under the tree, and during that time, he is tortured by visions from another world. He suffers his own feelings of mortification. He is tempted by beautiful women. All kinds of things happen right under the tree. But he doesn't ever move. And then one day, suddenly it happened. The experience, it happened. He spoke for the first time. His words were somewhat unintelligible in the beginning.
Like the cat.
Exactly. But he knew something happened because the feeling that he had was the feeling of utter, complete, and total cosmic bliss pouring through his body. His whole body came alive instantaneously to something he had no idea about, he was not expecting, and it was just pouring and pouring and pouring through his body. So picture him under the tree, and he's sitting there, and as this bliss experience is pouring through his body, he has the sudden realization that he can't yet verbalize, but that every single thing is perfect. It has a meaning, even if we don't understand it in this moment. Everything is aligned. He reaches down and he touches the earth as if to say, the earth is my witness, and I know that everything is perfect. He gets up and he walks away from the tree, and his friend walks up to him and says, what happened? What happened? And he says very simply, I woke up. End of the story. He spends the rest of his life trying to capture in words what he has experienced, the perfection of everything, and trying to express that. And some of it isn't even verbal. Like you have heard of the flower sermon where he just sits there. I love this one. He sits there holding a flower without saying a single word, and that's the sermon. And what is the meaning of that? So everybody who is observing that, who is experiencing that with him, has to come up with their own sensibilities about what that means. And you just think about the flower, all its stages, it's in its blooming, now it's picked, now it's a picked flower. Okay, what's the whole cycle? You know, so whatever comes to you about that is what it was about. Okay, so he wakes up, and then for 45 years he taught this message that he conceived. So he died about 483 BC. So he was born about 560, died about 483. That does not add up. I'm adding that. Yeah, it does add up. I'm sorry, I gave it to you wrong. He was born in 560. I think I just said 460. He was born in 560, and he died in 483 BC. Okay, that adds up. All right, so what did he come up with? This is what he came up with, basically, the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So the 4 Noble Truths are, 1, suffering exists. 2, desire is the cause of suffering. 3, desire is the only cause of suffering. And 4, there is a way to end desire. Okay, so desire means essentially that we wish things to be different than they are. So I think, the fundamental lesson here, I'm going to way oversimplify this, but I think because desire, you can look at it from so many different ways, and I tend to be a proponent of desire. Like, desire is a good thing because desire is what keeps the universe moving. But we go too far in any direction, it becomes a vice. Okay, so I think that desire, what he's talking about here, desire, the meaning of desire, and this is totally up for interpretation, but I think the meaning of it is to desire things to be different than they are, and it's futile. This desire becomes futile because for some reason it's inachievable, and that becomes the cause of suffering. And the lesson, or the ultimate goal of this, would be to try to learn how to use contemporary language, to move with the flow of energy. With the flow. How can you move with the flow? And my feeling about it, as you all know, would be, how can we actually create the flow? So how can we, in a sense, move ahead of the flow? Just through, through our thoughts. Like, how can we move the energy? Okay, so he came up with the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path this is the way to make things happen. So the Eightfold Path is a response to the 4th Noble Truth. So what the 4th Noble Truth is there is a way to end desire. Because it is, first, suffering exists. Desire is the cause of suffering. Desire is the only cause of suffering. There is a way to end desire. How do you end desire? Through the Eightfold Path. Eightfold Path is through developing within yourself right views, right intentions, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right strivings, right mindset, and right concentration. Okay, so I remember thinking about this many, many years ago. Views, intentions, speech, conduct, livelihood, strivings, mindset, concentration. But the key here is, what is the meaning of the word right? That's the key. What does it mean to have right intentions? And that becomes very, very personal. And in a sense, it's a scientific matter, as they would say in Buddhism, because it has to do with your own personal experience, what you take in, what you reject, which is all like the science of living. It's learning. It's the system of learning about yourself and what's important to you. So in Terra Nova, we are placing Buddhism in the center of the 5th power Cataclysm because of the Buddhist emphasis on suffering. And suffering is where cataclysm is where suffering would live on the tree of life. Cataclysm is where things are coming apart. Okay, and also it would be the place where the desire for conditions and sensibilities emerge, internal and or external, this feeling of wanting things to be different than they are. It would emerge strongly in the space of the 5. That's where we would feel victimized, and we want things to be different, both either externally or internally, right? So we have to figure out how to work with that. Okay, so one of the ways we're learning how to work with that or figuring it out is by studying the Kabbalah, looking at the meaning of the 5. And so I just want to read you just a little bit out of Kabbalah and Tarot of the Spirit about the definition of the 5 and what the 5 is about. 5 is the sphere of Geburah, it's called, Kabbalistically. 4 is Hesed, number 4 is the sphere of Hesed, and 5 is Geburah. So this is Geburah, the energy of 5. The energy of 5 Kabbalistically balances the energy of 4. 5 destabilizes in order to restabilize into new energies, patterns, and forms. The 4th and 5th spheres work together like scales. Each is necessary in order to maintain continuing cosmological equilibrium. There comes a time, for example, when providing sanctuary, which is a function of the 4, can actually enable or exacerbate a troublesome situation. In other words, there's a time to provide sanctuary, and there's a time not to provide sanctuary. Okay, and so we have to decide that. A corporation, for example, which has received some kind of sanctuary, may destroy a river with waste products. A parent may provide too much money for a drug-addicted child, which only exacerbates the child's problem. When conditions become too tight, too hot, or too toxic, the power of Geburah steps in and says, stop. Virtues such as tolerance and patience now become vices, and good judgment says, enough is enough. Even as the umbilical cord between mother and infant must be severed, 5 cuts off and cuts away. And are we witnessing that in our culture? So in the spiritual dimension, Geburah can entail a dark night of the soul. Eventually awakening will occur. In the emotional arena, relationships can break down, only to result in stronger relationships. Intellectually, attaining new knowledge can create a personal or collective identity crisis as the foundation for a new identity surfaces, emerges, or is in some other way revealed. Geburah, the 5, is also the sphere of physical disruption or destruction. Cataclysmic conditions can arise in the physical body or daily life as a result of illness, poverty, war, famine, epidemics, and natural disasters. And all of these occur in the cosmos, though knowledge that these things do occur doesn't necessarily make going through it any easier. We get caught in the crossfire of change. But rather than railing against our bad luck, this is what Job did all the way through, railing against bad luck. Rather than railing against our bad luck when the inevitable occurs, because it will occur, our task as spiritual students is to find enlightened ways of responding. Mm-hmm. And as we activate our most exalted values, and as we learn to, quote, think on our feet, we come to know our own strength. We expand our potential and become the heroes of our own lives. The critical knowledge is to realize that change happens. We come to realize again and again that true strength requires being equally willing to build up and tear down as conditions arise. We learn through this process that we have the power to create new kinds of conditions. That becomes central. Creating new conditions. This is the gift of cosmological creativity. Whereas in the beginning there may be chaos, that's the beginning of the 5 energies setting in, there could be chaos. In the end, there will be bravery, courage, valor, and power. Ideally, in the end, there will be enlightenment. Okay, so that is what we are moving toward. The intelligence, there's an intelligence associated with every one of these spheres. And the intelligence associated with the sphere number 5 is called the radical intelligence, which I just love. So the 5, which is that place of chaos, cataclysm, and deconstruction and all that, is what gives root, or the root can give rise to the deconstruction of the radical intelligence. And radical means root. When we feel the 5 energy, it hits us in the root place. Like the root is the basis. Rad means root, is the basis of who we are. Something is going to need to emerge out of that. Something is going to want to happen. The astrology, just on one note on the astrology, is Mars. Okay, so what happens in the 5 is the Mars, which is the male emitting, surging energy, gets activated. The power gets activated. The spiritual experience, thus the spiritual experience is the vision of power. So we move out of our complacency and have our vision of power when the 5s arise. And in the new cosmology, the new cosmology, Cataclysm, in Cataclysm we see that it's Cataclysm that actually that is actually building the cosmos, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So let's see, in this book, which is Visionary Cosmology, let's see, something I want to share with you here, if I can find it. Oh, yeah, because I'm looking in the wrong book. It's in this book. Okay, it is the new science, but this is out of Kabbalah and Terra Nova Seminary. Okay, almost. Okay, here it is. And so it's also in this book, Visionary Cosmology, a different version. Whereas the cosmological power of stabilization, which is sphere 4, secures forms and processes of productivity in the universe, the cosmological power of cataclysm, stabilization's partner in creativity, destroys, consumes, breaks down, and burns up, so the cosmos can continue to create. And what we call death is intrinsic to cosmological evolution, from the microscopic level to the macrocosmic levels, microcosmic to macrocosmic. The process of the life of a star 10 times the size of the sun provides a good example. A star is born when a cloud of hydrogen and helium gathers and begins to collapse in on itself. Then, due to high temperatures in the star's core, the hydrogen atoms melt down into protons that fuse together to form helium nuclei. And then as these particles fuse, some of their mass is converted into energy. This energy emerges in the form of photons, particles, and waves of light. Photons, particles, and waves of light, those are photons. Working their way outward from the core, the photons, traveling through this vast field of particles and atoms, create a force that holds back the gravitational collapse of the star. And when they reach the star's surface, they're coming from the center, and when they reach the star's surface, they radiate through the universe at the speed of light. And as long as the protons and neutrons continue to fuse into helium, photons are released from the core and the star continues to shine for 10 million years, perhaps. But then there comes a point when the star burns up all the hydrogen that's there. Okay, now the core, entirely helium, has no hydrogen to burn, and the fusion reactions cease. Then no more photons can be emitted, right? No more photons. Okay, so what happens is also at the same time resistance to gravity ceases. Particles and nuclei collide under pressure, the temperature soars, and the star begins to implode. Okay, what we are talking about here is ultimately the death of a star. This goes on. I don't want to read the whole thing to you about the death of the star, but it sinks in on itself, and then it begins to expand, and the particles expanding combine to form the 92 elements that make up the universe. So first it contracts and it starts to expand, and as it's expanding, it changes. You can read this later yourself. And here come the 92 elements that make up the universe. Gold, phosphorus, titanium, magnesium. The elements pour forth and are catapulted through the cosmos. And within the cosmos, they congeal into new star systems. And for example, one of these new star systems is our own solar system, with our star at the center, our sun. Ultimately, then, it was the death of a star that created the birth of our Earth. Because the death of a star gave rise to the birth of our sun, and at the birth of our sun was the birth of our Earth. Okay, this is the cosmological power of cataclysm at work. It's the power of the five, the power of transformational destruction that permeates the entire universe. One form of energy dies into another. Thus, the cosmological power of cataclysm involves a conversion experience wherein destruction works hand in hand to further the process of ever-evolving creation. So we have to have the breakdown. We have to have the death. It's an ongoing, continuing process in the universe. So for us as humans, what happens is that we're trying to come up with ways of dealing with this five energy in our lives on our plane, and the worst that could come out of this probably is death. But death is going to wind up being some kind of birth into another level. The five energy that we're working with as humans is basically contained in the 4 tarot cards of the fives: spiritual struggle, which the spiritual struggle could be like a dark night of the soul, a crisis of faith. That's the 5 of fire. The 5 of water would be the energy of a broken heart, where we're having emotional meltdown of some kind, where we are losing everything, and feeling that grief. The 5 of wind is fear, anxiety, worry about the future. And the 5 of earth is all of those physical aspects, like that I mentioned already several times, like natural disasters, getting ill, losing all your money in the stock market. It could be anything like that. Anything could happen. Kim shoots a missile over here, aimed at Moffett Field. I don't know where. If I were him, maybe I would send it there. I wouldn't if I were me, though. That's for sure. I love Moffett Field. But whatever. So any of those things are like this cataclysm. Okay, so this is cataclysm. We're leading into the question. Essentially, this is what the Buddha saw walking out into the world: the suffering, the brokenheartedness, the fear, the anxiety, the loneliness, and the pain, suffering, old age, and death, basically. Okay, just want to end this with the idea of death. And so this is our introduction, essentially, to Buddhism and also to the fives. Okay, so I want to just end with a little bit about death here. Death, out of visionary cosmology. Eras rise and fall, generations rise and fall. Within generations, just like every star and starfish, every centrated being dies. Death, the ultimate act of the power of cataclysm, is part of the universal plan. Death is intrinsic to existence in this universe. Maybe not in other universes, but in this universe, death is intrinsic. In living organisms, death is defined as the permanent cessation of all vital functions, which brings up the question, what is vital? And that raises a further question. What constitutes life, or consciousness, or intelligence? When we die, the matter in the atoms and molecules of our form is reabsorbed into the pan-original field. It will re-emerge as ever new processes and forms. The substances and energies of our being will constitute as something new. It's interesting to ask, how does the matter and energy that shapes each of us as an organism continue after we die? The matter and the energy. How does that continue after we die? When we begin to imagine the answer, we begin to know the truth of the universe even more deeply. Okay, and now one final note on burning the field. We have spoken of the power of cataclysm as something potentially negative, something to be feared, as disaster, extinction, and death. And yet the simple truth is that building up and taking down are equal parts of the process of creation. Consider this. In the world of the organism, too much cell propagation without enough obliteration becomes cancer. Consider this. If we don't weed the garden, it will be overtaken by invaders. Burning the field after the harvest creates a fertile zone for planting. Consider this. If a meteorite hadn't crashed into the ocean, we would not be here to have this conversation. Consider this. The power of cataclysm at one scale or another is involved with every significant creative act in the universe. The question becomes, how can you participate with the power of cataclysm to break down that which no longer serves? Participate with. Okay, so back to the Buddha. The Buddha might have asked these questions, might very well have asked these same questions. The Buddha may also have resonated very much with the Serenity Prayer, which we were discussing last time. And this Serenity Prayer came from an American theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr, who lived from 1892 to 1971. There are actually several versions of it, and this is the most common. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Beyond that, what we can do is, as spiritual students, is to learn how to go with the flow, what that means for us, to move with the flow of energy, participate with it, which may mean entering into new sets of conditions and working with those new sets of conditions instead of railing against it. And a really good way for us to enter into this experience is to begin with the practice of gratitude.